Welcome to a true spiritual adventure story like the world has never known, with your host, Dr. James Yogadhi Weldon. Good morning, this is Dr. Jim Weldon. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me, to hear more stories. Today we're going to take a little sidestep. If you've had a chance to listen to the earlier chapters, today we're going to be doing something a little bit unusual. I'm going to be introducing and talking a little bit about my third book. Surprisingly, long ago I was told that I would write 3 books on my adventures in the spiritual realm, and the purpose of these were really to provide a bridge of understanding between the East and the West, between the different cultures and the traditions of the world. Initially, all of this was written because I was so amazed and so surprised about what I passed through. At least in the West, we're really young in our understanding about what the potentialities of consciousness are. We've made huge advancements in every area, technology, medicine, and healthcare. But still, in spite of that, in some ways, our understanding of the spiritual dimension, the dimension of consciousness, I felt personally is lacking. At least that was my experience growing up, that there was really very little verification in my own culture. And I was forced, because of experiences that I had when I was quite young as a child, to look to the East, to try to verify that our life is much bigger than we possibly imagined. There are many mysteries in life. Obviously, one of these is what happened before we came here. What is our own past history? And I've often said in my discussions here that we're like huge icebergs floating through time. We're only seeing like the 1% right at the top of that. We don't realize there's a huge backstory. We each have a huge backstory. It's important to experience the basis of that, which is the deep consciousness within us, the big life within us all, and to understand how we're connected to all life. And second, to gradually over time begin to become aware of our earlier existence. And in my case, gradually that began to unfold. In the East, in India, they've had the benefit of many advanced souls for many thousands of years. There are stories in that culture that potentially go back 10,000 years. In some of the books called the Puranas, they're actually stories of the cosmic reality. In the West, our traditions, the backstory is not known. When you look at some of the sacred scripture, for example, in India, you will see that things like the Ramayana, the story of Rama and Sita, there wasn't a stenographer that was following these individuals around. There were individuals called rishis who were able to access that, much like we're able to log on to YouTube, if you will, and pick up something that's already been recorded. We've had that a little bit in the West, direct access, and really it's unusual. And also in other books, the Bhagavad Gita, part of a much bigger story called the Bhagavatam. There was a rishi in that part of the world which was able to access those events in a I guess you would say a non-volitional state of superconsciousness. And I talk about this a little bit earlier in the book. First book also, Living the Enlightened Life. Tap into that consciousness between the waking, dreaming, and sleeping states. In my case, this has been happening since I was a child. So I mention this because in the last segment in the book, one of these great teachers who has come and gone, the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, had just passed. And I can tell you at that time was a really extraordinary time for me. I speak in the couple of chapters earlier about the huge breakthrough I had in insight at that time, removing all the past karma that held me back. So I had that huge breakthrough, and I'm mentioning because right after that, a second big breakthrough, which I actually didn't talk about in my first book, because I didn't know how to explain it. It was another happening. That was actually the basis of the third book, which I'm holding here. I've shared with just a very, very few individuals. So shortly after I came home from the release of that karma that I've been told that had been holding me back, with no intent at all, with no desire, no thinking about that. One morning back at my home, I'm still living in Colorado. I have this house up on the side of the mountain overlooking a lake, a place called Netherland outside of Boulder. I start seeing these scenes, but not from what I would call a conscious state. It was from a superconscious state. And then later, as often happens when this kind of thing has happened to me, I would wake in the morning. In the same way that you might have dreams and remember them, but these are dreams of tremendous detail, feelings, emotions, and seeing the scenes. So I started seeing the scenes of a young child and his family in Israel. And as this began to occur over the next couple of days, I would come out of this and go, well, I better write this down. And so I'd come out of that in the morning, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then I would come out of that and I'd come to my computer and I'd type away. To me, these were just like memories. And it started telling a story. How to explain something like that being possible? And of course, we've all heard about Akashic records. Many of us have. So just like there's an individual level of our body, our life force, the second level, our mind, next level, memories, our intellect, our ego, and then the deepest, most mysterious aspect of ourself, our cosmic self. So in the universe, there also exist these levels. And one of the purposes of this book is to help people understand that in a lot of ways we are like fish living in the sea. And what we're looking for, the vast ocean, is all around us. It takes a certain perception to begin to realize the vastness of the sea. Funny story that once there was a congregation of fish. They heard about an individual a long time ago that was able to see the sea. He was considered a very wise fish, and they all gathered around to hear the stories of the sea. And my first book, Living the Enlightened Life, and those episodes, coming to understand the cosmic level of life. The second book is about my experiences coming into contact with a great spiritual teacher of our time, that being, his name is Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. And over the years, he has been tantalizing me with stories of my own culture, little bits and pieces over time. I listen to these stories and begin to wonder about them. One Christmas, he posted a very unique video online. And in this video, he began to share that story. And the first thing he said, this is a little controversial. The story was very interesting to me. And many of you perhaps have heard pieces of this over time. That story is that there was a very special adept, a very advanced student that was born in that area of, which is now Israel. Remember at that time, a couple thousand years ago, the influence of some of the knowledge of India had gone all the way down, even into those regions. And the story was that there was a special child that was born. 3 teachers came to talk to his parents when he was young, the wise men. These were apparently wise men, yogis that had been sent there, asking the child at a certain time to go to India to be trained. And then after some years in that part of the world, he returned to his homeland when John the Baptist, who had been talking about him, had immersed him in the water, baptized him. Something very special happened. And that individual, now perhaps in his 30s, began to teach. A huge force, presence came in. For a few years, many amazing things happened, healings occurred, but Jesus said had to be very careful. He talked in parables. And we know the classic story that he got in trouble. He was crucified, but then survived. You could say he resurrected. At least he survived that, came back out, and then left. The story in India was that actually he returned to India with students. A couple of his students. One went down to South India, Thomas. A second one, the middle part, maybe up towards Delhi, Bartholomew, and then Jesus was in the northern region, up in the Kashmir region, and actually continued to live his life. What was interesting is when Sri Sri shared this story, and there are many more details that I'm not going to talk about here, I was really amazed. And what was more amazing was that that particular video, although I had a copy on my computer at the time, disappeared somehow from my computer, and it's certainly not online. In my case, this whole backstory began to unfold of this child that was born in that area of the world in Israel. That I've had a teacher who was guiding me along all the way, even from the earliest days. This young child also needed his spiritual education. So page after page after page after page. And very interestingly, over the years, and in the same way this just kind of came out, it happened. And as time passed on over subsequent 15, 20 years or so, the founder of the Art of Living kept on dropping little pebbles to inspire my understanding. And so the whole backstory of this unique child and his life, of course, has never been told like this. And the whole purpose of this is basically to help understand that we are all connected and all the traditions have a common root. Individuals that come later obviously can have their own opinions, but at least in India, these kinds of insights by the rishis have allowed the stories to be told. And in India, nobody doubts that there was a rishi that saw somehow the events of the life of Krishna and told much more. Even Bhagavad Gita is just one little piece of this. And also, in earlier ages, the Ramayana. What's interesting is that the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita, that was actually seen by two different rishis. And they both wrote down at separate times and places the same story. They were at different times. One passed away. I'm not an expert in that history, but of course we've benefited from all of that. So if we're going to understand that life is big, life is long, and there is a sequence in developing the higher consciousness. It's quite real. I talked earlier about, at the beginning of this segment, about the fact that we've made progress in a lot of areas. You know, the technology, we've advanced so much. Literally, there could be 1 billion people listening to this. There isn't. And I'm actually posting it just to provide a record and to help people to understand that we're really in a really wonderful time in the world, an incredible time in the world. And I needed to introduce the topic of this third book because right at this time in my life, right after I had such an incredible breakthrough, many things that were holding back this consciousness broke or dissolved. That this sequence of events begin right after that, maybe in a week and a half after we'll see what happens with it. Hopefully the earlier story and the episodes in the book will help people in the West to accept that there may be some truth in this. And of course it makes sense in many ways, but nobody had done that before. There was a book that was published at one point called the AQUARIAN Gospel of Jesus. And I've read that, and that was inspirational. The gist of that is essentially true, but the deeper backstory was not told. Not in the way that was explained to me personally, with all the clues that was given to me by my teacher. So we'll see where this goes. So in anticipation of that, after I complete this story on book 2 of The Rise of the First World Teacher, I'll be deciding what to do with this. But it's there, you know. So we will see. Who knows? You know, life is a wonder. But I needed to share this now at this point in my life, because this is when this material began. That continued about 45 days. And then after that, switch was turned off. Not that it isn't accessible, more details are accessible, which of course we've had a lot of years to pass since then. So this is something to wonder about. You know, peek into book 3. But I'll read a few pages from it. And it's entitled The Story Behind the Greatest Story Ever Told. You know, take a walk out into your backyard some night and gaze out into the starry sky and ask a simple question. Where am I right now? Look up and contemplate the amazing fact that the light raining down upon you, and we now see from above, in many cases, begin billions of years ago from stars that may not even exist anymore. Stretch your understanding and realize that we are speeding along on a tiny, tiny blue bubble, speeding around a modest sun, moving imperceptibly about the outer arm of a spiral galaxy with billions of other stars racing through space at a fraction of the speed of light. Right now, you think we're moving about 1/3 of the speed of light through on this outer galaxy. Ask another question. Where am I now? About us in this vast space is a small group of galaxies clustered together that ultimately appear as our view expands, little strings in space, these clusters of galaxies. If we were to expand to the limit of time and space, all of this world would look like a bubble that has been growing some 13 billion years. Secondly, ask this question, who am I? Gazing at all of this, I have to admit, I really have very little knowledge about ourselves. Even if all of the knowledge that ever existed in every human mind that ever existed were to be placed against this vast reality, we would have to say, collectively, we know almost nothing at all. All that comes in that space of wonder is silence. And eventually, after many years, there arises a stillness so profound that the deepest questions reveal truths that cannot be spoken. In the last 2,000 years, the progress has been slow for mankind. In the last 200 years, it has been a little faster. In the last 50 years, it has been a little faster. But even with all this progress, compared to the vast universe and the light raining down on us from all of these stars, we have to admit we have a lot we need to learn yet. In almost every sphere of life, we have made progress as new understanding came and we grew in these insights. Now with globalization, the globalization of spirituality of the world. And we need to allow ourselves to re-examine the conclusions in our traditions that we thought were fixed and settled long ago. And the purpose of this third book is to help that progress along so that we may rise to deeper insights about that which we call God or the divine. And so begins the first chapter in this third book, which is entitled The Existence of a Second History of Jesus. So there's more to come. We will see. Thank you for joining me today. Next episode will be about the Silver Jubilee celebration of the art of living and the amazing, amazing things that happened as more than 1 million came from all over the globe for this event. So today, think about your life. Take some time to realize that your life is bigger than we ever could imagine. We're all on a journey here. And my story is only for helping people be inspired to continue to do the deeper work in discovering that. It's always my suggestion that progress is faster when you get the proper education. And there is a spiritual education which we can undergo, which can immensely improve our life in all ways. Taking advantage of that has been part of what I'm sharing here, how it's inspired and enriched my life. You know, really, we are one world family, part of one life. We're part of one existence in this precious little blue globe that we're on right now. We need to take care of. We need to honor it. We need to respect it. Because this is part of us as well. It's just out of ignorance. We don't feel we're connected to all of this, that we act in a short-sighted way. So thank you for joining me today. I'll be back for another episode. This is Dr. Jim Weldon speaking from Heavenly Mountain, this wonderful community in the home of the Art of Living Retreat Center here in Boone, North Carolina, which I live. And may that divine life in you awaken. May the force of grace and high consciousness awaken in you. It's your consciousness. Namaste. Thanks for joining us in our YouTube channel, books, podcast episodes on living the enlightened life, and autobiography with your host, Dr. James Yogadhi Weldon.